Season 8 is perhaps the most unique feeling season of Drag Race there is. There's been lots of talk about creating eras for the show. Jack Fett has a great video about it. But I think seasons 7 and 8 are kind of in an era of their own. They come after the golden era of seasons 4 through 6, but before the VH1, like uber polished era of seasons 9 through 12. These two seasons exist in a kind of a limbo, but season 8, even more than season 7, I feel like suffered from that limbo. Season 7 has so many iconic moments. Is There Something on My Face? The entire Shakespeare episode, the Fashion Queens versus the Bitter Old Lady Brigade storyline, Katya's rise to the fan favorite of the franchise, the Roar lip sync, Max at Shock elimination, I could go on. But season 8 does not have that. If I had to label season 8, it would be the season of vibes. Sure, it has its iconic moments, the double elimination, Derrick's rivalries with Naomi and Bob, but that's kind of it. The episodes are fun, the cast is great, the challenges are entertaining, but it just doesn't have those same iconic moments week to week like many other seasons do. That doesn't necessarily hinder the season, it just gives it its own unique flavor. While other seasons try and make every episode the most dramatic, groundbreaking thing ever, Season 8 is happy to just have fun and kind of coast to the end. It was the first season I ever watched, and I feel like it was the perfect one to start out with. If I ever had to, give someone a season to start, I would say start with Season 8 and go from there. It's not the greatest season of all time, but it's not anywhere close to the bottom either. It was great to show me the concept of the show. It had some unique drag as well as more traditional drag, but because it's not the best season ever, I was able to be blown away by other seasons afterwards and not be comparing everything else to this season, the first one that I watched. I feel like that's why I go back to this season a lot. Not just because it's the first one I ever saw and it has this major nostalgia factor for me, but because it's a nice palate cleanser. A lot of Drag Race seasons have the exact same vibe, especially in the VH1 era, but going to one that feels completely its own thing is super refreshing. This season makes a big deal about the premiere being the 100th episode of the series, and that Derrick Barry is the 100th queen to enter the workroom. But in order to make that fit, they had to have a smaller cast of only 12 queens and 10 episodes on the season. And this is the smallest cast since season 2. And I think that having a smaller cast definitely impacted the season. Having less episodes impacted the season. It's definitely much quicker to blow through. It's great for binging in a single day, honestly. But we mentioned the cast, so let's talk about the cast going in and who might have been on production's radar preseason. The big name on this cast is Kim Chi. She had a huge social media presence going into the season and was one of the first queens, if not the first, I think she might have been the first, to have that type of narrative of, oh my gosh, this is a social media icon. Everyone knows who this queen is because of Instagram. She was also very close with Trixie Mattel, who was a fan favorite on season 7, which also helped bring her into kind of the Drag Race fans' orbit before her season started. Thorgy Thor and Bob the Drag Queen were also huge names in New York at the time, with Thorgy having auditioned for the show many times before. Now she finally got on. Robbie Turner is good friends with Jinx Monsoon and Ben de la Creme, who are both huge stars of the show from Seattle. And as the newest Seattle queen, she definitely had some high expectations from fans. And I'm sure production. Also, Naysha Lopez, who was a Miss Continental winner, which I'm not sure the show actually showed us was as big of a deal as it actually was. Maybe because she was the first out, but that's a major crown to come into Drag Race with. But the big get of this season was Derrick Barry. She had been doing Britney Spears impersonation in Las Vegas for so many years. She'd become a huge name on the strip in that scene, even appearing on other programs like America's Got Talent. The fact that they chose her to be the 100th queen to enter is very telling of her prowess off the show in the world of drag, and her being a celebrity impersonator would be a first for the show, who previously had Chad Michaels compete, but Chad was known for more than just doing Cher, even if Cher was her main kind of shtick. So this was a pretty stacked cast coming in. Let's start to go through the episodes and see if any of that comes into play when it comes to judging. So the first episode is all about the legacy of the first 99 episodes of the show. We have all of the winners back for a photo shoot, and then the Maxi Challenge is a design challenge, but they're each assigned a different previous design challenge from a previous season to redo. Now, this premiere is a bit weird because the photo shoot seemed to heavily factor into the final judging. I'm not sure if it's because the winners were there for it, so it was a bit grander than the regular photo shoots that they do, but that's what happened. I'm actually fine with the photo shoot being factored into judging, but if you're going to do that, don't give out a win, like the winner of this mini challenge is. Because having there be a mini challenge winner makes it feel like we've already moved on from it. If you don't give a winner, then okay, we're factoring in everything that has happened so far this episode, that all goes into the judging. That just makes more sense. So I was going back and forth whether I thought that was fair to include in the final judging, and I came to the conclusion that I don't think it was, because truly it only affected one person, Layla McQueen. And I think the entire reason why it was factored into the judging is because Layla was so bad at it. And with Robbie Turner winning it, it justified keeping her out of the bottom as well and replacing Robbie with Layla. Now, Layla McQueen was a queen who was so off the radar pre-season that the Nancy Drews never even clocked her as being on the season until very close to the cast being revealed. The whole Scarlet Starlet situation happened because no one knew that Layla had left to go film. I think when they saw how timid she was from the jump, she sort of became a great scapegoat to be potentially the first out. The show always wants there to be some sort of justification or storyline involved in an elimination, and Layla looking like a toddler hiding behind her mother at a party during the photo shoot was their justification and their storyline. Obviously, that did not pan out as she fucking turned that lip sync out, so I decided that no, I don't think it was fair for the photo shoot to count in the final judging. So despite Layla kind of being painted as a super green and nervous kind of queen, she managed to turn it to that applause lip sync. So looking at the judging for this episode as a whole, looking at the looks, this was not a very strong group of design looks. There are some standouts, yes, 2 of them, but everyone was riding the struggle bus, it seems. As the winner of the photo shoot, Robbie Turner got to give out the boxes for each category and accidentally forgot to give one to herself, so she ended up with the dog ball category, the bitch ball, and it is something that she didn't even want. But Robbie obviously does not end up in the bottom 2. Layla ends up lip-syncing against Naysha Lopez, who was, I think, the clear worst of this challenge. I mean, Naysha's design look, it's one of the worst design looks of all time on the show. I mean, it's that bad. But Layla's look is actually pretty cool. I agree with the judges' critique that the bottom half needed something else, but the construction of the jacket is amazing. The hair, the makeup, the hat, they all elevate the look. It's definitely not top worthy, but I don't think it's bottom 2 worthy. Not when there are 2 looks that I think are much, much worse. Looping back to Robbie Turner, she is pretty much the main character of this first episode. She's the one commenting on everything that happens. She very quickly comes forward as a great narrator. She won the mini challenge, she screws herself over in the maxi challenge, and then she barely escapes being in the bottom. Now, many people feel like Robbie should have been bottom 2 this episode, and I can see why. The meat dog treat titties, the doggy poop bag, it's disturbing, to say the least, but I always thought there was a look that was even worse than this one. Cynthia Lee Fontaine's sugar ball look. I mean, this is bad, and I don't know why it's not talked about more. Robbie's look is deranged, yes, but the construction is at least there. Cynthia's look is a mess from both a design perspective and a construction perspective. I'm sorry, I love Cynthia so much, but, yeah, I mean, the skirt is a piece of fabric wrapped around her waist, and we can literally see where she connected it sloppily in the front, The corset is only partially covered in candy. She just kind of stops as it gets closer to the front and the center. The wax lips that she has at the top are completely off center. The hair doesn't go with the look literally at all. The pink tights and the red shoe are also like a major choice. I just don't like a single aspect of this look. While with Robbie, I can at least give her props for the campiness and the good construction, even if the design is insane. So for me, neither Layla nor Robbie were in the bottom. It was Cynthia. Now, for the rest of the placements, we see Naomi is also low for struggling with her boat, which, I mean, that thing looks heavy, and Naomi is the smallest girl in this cast. But also, the boat itself is just, like, not it. I'm not sure if she had to make the dress that she's wearing as well, but it looks like something that she brought. So it's hard to judge her when she had kind of a completely different job than everyone else in the cast. She could have been safe, but low isn't like rigged either necessarily. I just don't think they should have included this challenge in the list. It's too different from what everyone else is doing. Then we have a top 3 of Acid Betty, Derrick Barry, and Kim Chi, with Kim Chi getting the win. Now, this is a pretty contested win at this point, and I can understand why. I mean, the outfit kind of ends at the waist, which is a critique that they gave to Layla and was kind of one of the justifications for her being in the bottom. I also don't like that the bra on Kim's is just a bra, a brassiere. But on the other hand, it's a very out-of-the-box look with a great unexpected concept. And, like, hair is a very difficult medium to not make look, like, cheap and odd when you're using it on a garment. As we've seen from many other hair looks throughout the years, she was able to make this look very high fashion and show off her makeup skills at the same time. The other option for the win was Acid Betty, who also had a difficult medium to work with in Paper Money, but she was able to make a look that had movement, it had flow, it was very grand. My only critique is I probably would have ditched the gold tight, but I mean, that's just nitpicking. This look is truly a masterpiece. I don't know, it's hard to say this was rigged, because Kim's look was, like, genius, it's iconic, but I also think the makeup and the jewelry are doing a lot of the heavy lifting, while Betty made a head-to-toe look all made out of her medium. So I probably would say Betty deserved the win here over Kim, and Kim's reputation might have, like, boosted her a tiny little bit in this premiere. The thing that really, like, moves this into the rigged territory for me is the critique that Layla got about the bottom half then not being given to Kim from what we saw. As for Derrick Barry being in the top, I also think her reputation may have boosted her a little bit here. I mean, her look was cute. She had to do a Christmas look, and she made a sexy bra and skirt number with a peekaboo mistletoe gag under the skirt. It was cute. It was definitely very cute. But at the end of the day, it was a bra and a skirt. I think Bob low-key could have been in the top here. She did have fabric, yes, which was more than a lot of the other people had to work with, but she had, like, ugly-ass fabrics that she was able to make into, like, a pretty cute dress. And it's super well-made. And the iconic purse that spawned her catchphrase, I mean, I don't know. I just feel like her sewing could have been highlighted here over Derrick's gimmick. So the first episode, you can definitely see who may be getting a little boost, who production might be like, we see you, and we see who production doesn't give a shit about. But the next episode is the iconic Bitch Perfect Rusical Challenge, where we have our double elimination of Dax, ! and Layla McQueen. Now, Cynthia Lee Fontaine and Chi DeVayne win the mini challenge, so they are team captains. They pick their teams. Team Chi Chi ends up being the team Shady Bitches, which are like the bad girls. And then Cynthia is team Lady Bitches, which are the like prim and proper Catholic schoolgirl kind of vibes. And the top 3 of this episode was super clear. Chi Chi, Betty, and Thorgy devoured and all had great runways as well. One of the main stories of this episode, though, is what a disaster Team Shady Bitches might be because they're falling apart the entire time before they go to perform. Chi Chi and Betty are at each other's throats the entire episode, And Thorgy narrates a lot of this storyline for us, helping to get us know Thorgy better, but also giving us perspective on like Betty and like Betty's type of drag and her attitude in New York. She keeps telling us that Betty is like a gigantic bitch, and the footage backs up that claim to us. But Chi Chi is unwilling to bow down at all to Betty, and after getting her team together and slaying the challenge, Chi Chi gets the second win of the season, which was incredibly deserving. The other major storyline from this episode has to do with Kimchi. Kim is picked last for the Rusical because she can't dance and struggles to walk in heels, and from then on, she's just kind of like down on herself. There's like one of my favorite, I don't know why this is like always in my mind, but I think about this all the time. She has this confessional where she's picked last and they just cut to her in the confessional and she's like, I wouldn't have picked me either. And she's like looking like very sad, and I don't know why, but it makes me laugh. I don't know why, but it makes me laugh. It's just so dramatic. But she actually gets advice, I think, from Bob to make her bad dancing like part of the character. And low-key, I think this is what saved her from the bottom this week, because she goes for this kind of like clumsy nerd character in the Rusical, and suddenly her not being on every beat doesn't look like the worst thing. It looks like what that character would do. It's honestly pretty genius. Now, does that completely absolve her of missing a few moves and being off beat? No. But I do remember her in the Rusical, and I had fun watching her, which is more than I can say for Layla or for Dax, who were both just completely not there. They completely disappeared. Dax had little to no energy, and especially with her being on the much better team, she was completely outshined. Layla had even less of a reason to get lost since her team was mostly just like safe, fine performances. Robbie was great, but everyone else was average, so the fact that Layla was still completely unmemorable is not good. Pair that with Dax and Layla's runways, which were a total miss. I think the bottom two was very clear here. Kim had one of my favorite runways of the night, and I think a low placement to acknowledge her missteps was fine by me. I know a lot of people think Kim should have been in the bottom for this, but I think they forget just how unmemorable Dax and Layla were and how terrible their runways were. Whereas Kim, I understood exactly who her character was, I remember her for good reasons, and her runway was great. Now, there's also been a lot of talk about whether the double elimination was justified, and I personally think it was. Yes, there have been more boring lip syncs for sure, but this one just had so much like desperation in it. It was cringe, and like cringe is worse than boring. And I think to production, bringing Naysha back was a very tempting idea. Layla just did not have the confidence it took to make it very far, and Dax had been pretty low energy in both the workroom and in the confessional, so like losing both of them to bring back a Miss Continental, who was actually pretty great in the confessional, just makes sense for like a better TV viewing experience. And the lip sync was also just bad. So like I don't think that there's any Riggory there. So Naysha is back, we're at a top 10, and it's time for an acting challenge. It's funny to think back to when Empire was just like so big during its first few seasons. It was big enough to warrant an entire Drag Race Maxi challenge about it, but damn, that show fell off quick. Like, I know that it was probably on for longer than I thought it was, but to me, it was on for like 2 seasons and then I never heard anything about it ever again. This episode really is the introduction to Bob the Drag Queen for the audience. The first 2 episodes, Bob was, she was a narrator. She definitely been in the confessional a lot. So we've seen that she has major charisma. But in both challenges, she was kind of just middle of the road. She wasn't incredible. She wasn't bad. She was just safe. But this is where you truly get to see the magic of Bob the Drag Queen. But this also sets up one of the main narratives of the season, Bob versus Thorgy. Bob, Thorgy, and Betty have been set up as the 3 New York girls who were all friends previous to the season starting, but also talk major shit on each other in the confessional or the shade tree, if you remember that twist that lasted all of 3 minutes. We've seen what Thorgy thinks of Betty last episode, and this episode sets up her story with Bob. They are both playing the Taraji P. Henson character, Chocolate Chip Cookie, for their skits, and this is like the main role. It's kind of like a make or break moment. You either win with this role or you go home with this role. and they both demolished this episode. Bob taking off her coat, Thorgy beating Naysha with a broom. Every memorable moment from this challenge features Bob or Thorgy. Bob ends up winning the challenge despite wearing, this. One of the notoriously worst outfits of all time. But I think the win still does make sense. I think overall, Bob did maybe like a teeny bit better than Thorgy in the challenge. But despite Bob's look being this, Thorgy's look isn't like anything crazy. Like, I think it's one thing if Thorgy comes out in a jaw-dropping look. I think she wins this episode hands down. But her look, like, it's cute. It's simple, but it's not mind-blowing. And also narratively, it just makes sense. Thorgy is shown to be intimidated by Bob and wanting to prove herself against her. So by Bob barely beating Thorgy in the challenge, this is going to continue to ignite that flame. And wow, does that work? Because Bob versus Thorgy is probably one of the storylines from the season most remembered by fans. It's referenced when Thorgy comes back on All Stars 3. It's led to them being like a fan favorite duo over the years, in all the things that they've done together since. And it all stemmed from Bob winning the RuPaul's Empire Challenge. I will say, if this was a double win, I don't think anybody would have minded. Thorgy was incredible. Bob was incredible. They were the two clear standouts of this entire challenge. They both did an incredible job. This could definitely have been a double win. But, I mean, then we wouldn't have gotten the Thorgy Thor storyline of the entire season. So maybe they knew what they were doing here. Because each character is played by two queens, it's kind of easy to compare performances this challenge. And while Bob and Thorgy both slayed, the same cannot be said for many others. Naomi and Kim both play the same role, and while Naomi is forgettable, Kim's iconic line delivery is funny, even if it's for the wrong reasons. Chi and Naysha both play the same character, and they're both extremely, extremely forgettable as well. I couldn't tell you one thing that they did, except Naysha being beat by Thorgy with a broom. Cynthia and Derrick both play this, like, lesbian character, and it's cringy as hell for both of them. And then Betty and Robbie play a character with a split personality, which does not age well. But while Betty slays it, Robbie was a disaster. Robbie came into this episode being tied to both Jinx and Dayla and kind of talked about all of her acting experience, and, you know, Jinx and Dayla were known for their acting on the show, and so there's a lot of, you know, pressure on her, but she seems very up for the challenge, and then immediately fumbles the ball the second the challenge starts recording. She, like, barely escaped the bottom in the premiere, but this is the episode where we get to see what Robbie is made of when put under pressure, and she absolutely annihilates the lip sync. But besides Bob and Thorgy's part, and to, like, a much lesser extent, Robbie and Betty's, none of these other roles have, like, any substance whatsoever. So choosing a bottom is hard when so many people underperformed. But, like, is that because they can't act or because their characters are flat and lifeless in the script? Maybe both. The worst of the night are definitely Robbie, Derrick, and Cynthia. Cynthia cannot get the delivery down. Robbie is messing up every 5 seconds, and Derrick is just, like, a bit awkward. But I think they got the right bottom two in Cynthia and Robbie. Derrick wasn't great, but her runway was, and her mess-ups are, like, less egregious. I remember Cynthia's "I'm a strong, gay woman," and Robbie, like, self-destructing while trying to play two characters, like, much more than anything Derrick did. So Cynthia and Robbie lip sync to Mesmerize by Faith Evans, and this is one of my favorite lip syncs of all time. I think it's one of the most underrated lip syncs of all time. Robbie looks incredible. I love this runway look. And she's doing the whole thing in roller skates. It's so iconic. I remember going into this lip sync the first time watching and thinking that Robbie was cooked, and I was shocked to see Cynthia leave so early. I'm glad that we got another season with Miss Cynthia Lee Fontaine because she's truly one of the sweetest people to ever be on this show. The way she interacts with all of the queens from the show, all of the creators. I've never had a bad encounter with Cynthia, and she's like my ultimate Miss Congeniality from the show. But unfortunately, the stars were not aligned for her this episode, and we lose her way too early on this season. But now we get into one of my favorite challenges of the season, the New Wave Music Girl Group Challenge. So this is like the prototype girl group challenge, and I think it works so well. I love when a girl group challenge has a theme like this one or like the 1950s one from season 14. And 80s New Wave is like my entire vibe. The fact that Blondie was guest judging, it's so iconic to me. So let's talk about each group. The New York girls team up, and we get more Bob and Thorgy content as Bob tries to rein Thorgy in from being distracted, and we just see how all over the place Thorgy can be with her thoughts and her concepts, and how she can be kind of difficult to work with at times. So this is, the first episode we kind of see Thorgy's idiosyncrasies in full force, and that becomes her main storyline from here on out for this season and then all of All Stars 3. We also see that Bob can maybe be a little bit unaware of how she comes across at times as she challenges Lucian Piani while recording, scaring both of her teammates as they could potentially be penalized for it. But her immediate apology on stage during critiques shows that she's able to reflect and take responsibility for her shortcomings. This is one of the first moments where I remember being like, ooh, I'm getting winner vibes. They do outstanding as a group. Their lyrics are fun. They do street meets. And all three of them are great performers. So they do kind of get outshined, though, by the sheer ridiculousness of Lay Chicken Wings, which is Robbie, Naomi, and Kim. They are 100% the underdogs of this challenge. And they manage to outdo any expectations and come out on top with their insane and hilarious song. Naomi Smalls, up to this point, had almost completely faded into the background of the season. I remember on my first watch never being able to remember her name, or even that she was like around for the first few episodes. I mean, she'd been performing fine up to this point, but this was her like breakout moment of the season for me, and showed me that she could be funny, that she was a great performer, that she can turn a look. Kim had an amazing premiere, but then had been kind of struggling a bit the last few episodes, especially since she's known to not be a great performer. This could have been a train wreck, but it was nice to see her just fully embrace the silliness of the challenge and show kind of a whole new side of herself. And then Robbie ate this episode so hard. Her performance, her runway, coming back from last week with such a fire to succeed, it was just great to watch. She definitely had not been meeting the expectations those first few episodes, but like this episode showed that she did have what it took to stand on the same stage as her fellow Seattle sisters did. She wins the challenge on her birthday, and it all just feels very correct. The bottom group this episode also happened to be potentially the most iconic. When you watch a video of Drag Race's like best cringe moments, Dragometry is probably in it. But it's also like the good kind of cringe. They're not serving, but I was still fed. The song is so catchy, yet sung so terrible. The looks are so awful, yet so memorable. The team's synergy is nowhere to be found, yet they're the most interesting group of them all. It's beautiful and terrible. This group had a lot of tension as Chi wore her neon runway for the roller skates runway, and now she had nothing to wear. So she's more concerned with sewing a new outfit rather than focusing on the main challenge. And her teammates are definitely feeling the frustration from that. They do Dragometry. It's the most random group. This is like so random. Like these three people coming together, insane. Naysha is the clear bottom here, despite having the best runway of the three, but she was the most awkward in the challenge. And after coming back, after being the first out, she had to make like every challenge worth it. And so she dropped the ball here, despite her trying to be a good leader for her team. Chi and Derrick is tough. I mean, they were pretty equal, I would say, in the challenge. They both looked super nervous, but they did have some fun moments. And then their runways are both like super simple. Chi got read down by Michelle for only wearing a bathing suit. And then Derrick was wearing a bathing suit with a skirt. But overall, Derrick definitely looked better, I would say. And I think it's a better story as well for Chi to be in the bottom here and like prove herself and like prove why she deserves to be here and that she is a superstar. So yeah, there's really no Riggory for me this episode. Call Me is the lip sync of the season. For now, Chi Chi eats, and Naisha puts up a hell of a fight, but Chi Chi shows us a whole new side of herself and what a fighter she is, and she sends Naisha back home. The next episode is Snatch Game, and this was a pretty weak Snatch Game overall. The top three is very obvious because everyone else was either forgettable or terrible outside of Chi Chi. This is another Bob versus Thorgy for the crown moment. Thorgy does Michael Jackson, and it's literally so funny. She looks so much like him, it's scary. And then Bob is the first queen to play two different characters, starting as Uzo Aduba and then turning into I fucking almost just did it. Turning into Carol Channing, which, I mean, I don't know if you could find two more opposite people to play as. This is also the Madonna runway, the infamous Madonna runway, and unfortunately, Thorgy is part of Kimono Gate, while Bob takes a risk and dresses as Madonna in her Boy Scout uniform look. So I think both the fashion risk and the risk in doing two characters in Snatch Game gets Bob her second win. And this is where we really start to see Thorgy, fall apart. Derrick and Chi Chi also do well in Snatch Game as Britney Spears and Eartha Kitt respectively, and this was a big make-or-break moment for Derrick. She'd been in the bottom three the last 2 weeks and narrowly escaped lip-syncing both times. Her runways had been critiqued, her reliance on Britney drag had been critiqued, and for such a huge star, it seemed like her time on the show was going to be limited. But she does two things extremely right in this episode that put her in the top. She takes the risk and plays Britney in the Snatch Game. Now, this is risky for two reasons. One, her entire career is based off of this woman. So if she flops as her, this is a major hit to her reputation. But also, we've seen Britney played almost to perfection by Tatiana in the first Snatch Game, and she won with it. So it's always risky to play a character that's already been done well by somebody else, since everyone has something to directly compare your version to. But Derrick also takes a major risk on the runway, doing the kimono like half the cast did, but hers was next level. It had hand-painted Madonna on the sleeves. It was a very different hair for Derrick and a different attitude, the way that she sold the look. She was able to both nail what she's best at in the challenge while also delivering something completely different on the runway, both in the same episode. And this is a huge turning point for Derrick in the season. As I mentioned, Chi Chi also did a great job this episode as Eartha Kitt, but I do think Derrick was a bit stronger both in the challenge and the runway and was the one deserving of a top placement. Chi Chi takes a risk by playing Kimmy Jong-un, and this is something we see a lot more now with people making up characters or gender swapping characters, but Kim was the first to really do this in this way. We don't really see much from her. She's fine from what we see. Her runway is great. She's safe as fuck. The bottom three all really struggled in this episode. Betty as Nancy Grace was so flat. She looked nothing like her and was just giving crazy eyes the whole time talking about kidnapping. And that was kind of it. Her Madonna runway is from Bedtime Stories. It's cool that she went for something different, but Betty has shown us so many highly detailed, out-of-the-box runways, and a white dress with some birds with some poles sticking out was just not the same caliber we'd seen from her previously. Robbie was Diana Vreeland, and I don't think I understood just how bad this portrayal was until I watched Raja do the same character on All-Star 7. But she did have a solid runway that stood out among all the kimonos, and it was a great kind of marrying of Robbie's drag and Madonna's drag. And then there's Naomi Smalls. I said last episode that she finally had her breakout moment, and I mean, she definitely stood out in this episode for sure, maybe for the wrong reasons this time. She played Tiffany Pollard, and this was one of the worst Snatch Game performances of all time. She was just Naomi. She was soft-spoken. She was just very chill, and there was no Tiffany to be had. But luckily, Naomi redeemed her Snatch Game when she came back for All Stars. I guess Robbie being safe makes sense here. All three Snatch Games were pretty equally horrid, but Robbie's runway was definitely my favorite of the three. And this is where the storyline of the season takes a hard shift. I think we all were expecting Betty to send home Naomi and continue to be the main villain of the season, but Naomi fucking Smalls showed up to work that day and Bodied causing a commotion, which is like a bottom tier Madonna single, might I add. Why just do Into the Groove. Just do Into the Groove. She sent home Betty, who had had 4 incredible performances so far this season up to this point, and it was low-key everything. Not because I don't love Betty, but because it made the entire rest of this season extremely unpredictable. Jack Fed has an amazing video on this if you haven't seen it, so go watch that after this. So we go into our top 7 makeover episode with one of the main characters of the season gone, and Naomi Smalls left to make history. This is my favorite challenge of the season. It's the Wizard of Oz makeover. It's very random, low-key a little insensitive that their makeover partners are the cast of Little Women LA. You know, like you invite the Little Women to a Wizard of Oz challenge. That's crazy. That's crazy. But the kicker is that they are each assigned a different character from Wizard of Oz, and they have to create runway looks, 2 looks based on that character. It's so fun. Although I do wish they just did this at top 6, because Thorgy gets stuck with the Emerald City Citizen, which is just like, Like, I guess, like, they can't have her be Auntie Anne, giving Auntie Anne realness, or, like, Flying Monkey Eleganza, but hers is just, like, her character is so boring. I'd be so mad. I say character. It's not a character. It's just, like, it's like a background person. But the Little Women, the LA kind, not the Civil War kind, get to choose their partner and already are assigned their character. So the queens have absolutely no say in what they end up doing, which, like, I don't really find that fun, especially when, like, the reading challenge was the mini challenge here. That's a challenge I think is deserving of getting, like, a good power as a reward to either, like, divvy up the makeover partners, divvy up the Wizard of Oz characters, just, like, something. Nonetheless, I think everything about this episode worked out extremely correct. Derrick, Bob, Chi, and Robbie definitely all struggled big time, but Derrick and Robbie were, like, next level bad, like some of the worst makeovers we've ever seen. Naomi and Thorgy and Kim were clearly the best. I don't know why Thorgy is just safe when she had possibly the hardest job, since her character isn't even a character. She had no blueprint to go off of, and she made 2 very clean, very chic outfits. But Naomi Smalls was the only choice to win this episode. This is seriously one of the best makeovers of all time, and one of the best design challenges of all time. It makes me so mad there wasn't a design challenge on All Stars 4, because we were robbed of getting to see Naomi slay once again. We get a really great lip sync from Derrick Barry, who we finally see in the bottom 2, and she absolutely demolishes Robbie Turner to I Love It by Iconopop and Charlie XCX. And Robbie, who started out one of the main characters of the season, kind of just fizzled out midway through. The next episode is a very depressing one for me as a Thorgy Thor mega stan, and it is the political commercial challenge. The queens are paired up and have to make commercials bashing the other on why they shouldn't win the election. This is such a slam dunk episode for Bob and Derrick. After Betty left, Derrick had kind of taken the role as main villain, and her and Bob had not gotten along for weeks now. So when they get to, like, be paired up together here, things could have gone very wrong. But at the end of the day, both of them are professionals, and they actually use their rivalry to their benefit, creating by far the best 2 commercials of the night. Derrick comes out of her shell even more, and Bob continues to be the main comedic force on the season, much to Thorgy's chagrin. They both win the challenge. It's very correct. Then there is Naomi Smalls and Kimchi, who are a bit uneven. Naomi is hilarious in her commercial, while Kim is kind of awkward and unfunny, but they both absolutely slay the black and white runway. And that leaves Chi and Thorgy, who are a pretty random pairing, and their commercials end up feeling kind of random too. Thorgy's a great actress, but her commercial kind of feels all over the place. It doesn't have many punchlines, and I do think it was the worst of the night. And I mean, her storyline all season is that she's kind of like meandering all over the place. It's hard for her to focus, and for this to kind of be exactly what was wrong with her commercial, it's very fitting. Chi, I don't think hers was bad at all. It feels like one of those things where it is awkward because no one is laughing, but if you put a laugh track behind it, It's actually pretty funny. She has great delivery. I think she does a good job of relating things to her while also making fun of Thorgy. I didn't really have any complaints with this commercial. I think that they wanted, a team to win together and then lose together because they really read Chi down here for no reason. While I think Kim has a better runway, I just do not think Kim's commercial was it. And it's not like Chi-Chi's runway is abysmal or anything where that could knock her into the bottom over Kim Chi. I do think the bottom should have been Kim and Thorgy, and this is one of the only few big things I would change about the season. Basically, since the first episode, I think the bottoms and the winners have felt pretty correct. But this one, I don't know. I just think Chi-Chi got kind of screwed here. But I mean, it did lead to the greatest lip sync of the season, one of the greatest lip syncs of all time, when we get to see Chi DeVayne do And I'm Telling You from Dreamgirls. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talk about how Kim was helped through the season by production, and up until this point, I don't believe that to be true, but I do think this episode could have been her first bottom placement of the season. The problem is, no one else really has a winner's edit besides Bob at that point, besides Kim. Thorgy had been doing well, but all of the challenges she could have won, Bob barely edged her out, and her entire storyline is kind of the craziness of her brain and her jealousy of Bob. That's not a winning arc. Naomi had finally been doing well, but was basically non-existent from the first half of the season. Chi-Chi was one of the main characters, but had been struggling a lot in the second half of the season, and didn't really have another breakout challenge moment after her win in episode 2. And then Derrick was the villain of the season. Kim really was the only competition to Bob narratively in season 8. She had a major fan base back home already. Her underdog storyline would ensure her to be a huge fan favorite. I understand why she was potentially saved here, and as much as I love Thorgy, I think Bob's win becomes even more obvious if Kim goes at top 6. But like I said, we get the iconic And I'm Telling You lip sync. Chi-Chi sends Thorgy home in what I thought was a very shocking elimination at the time, but looking at the season now, I think it makes total sense storyline-wise. Thorgy either wins a challenge or goes home here, and she didn't win the challenge, and she honestly kind of floundered in this comedy challenge, which is supposed to be her strongest area, so I think that it made sense for her to leave here. So that leaves us with an extremely random top 5, and one of my favorites in all of Drag Race. We're at the book ball. The queens have to turn a look based on being a baby queen, literally, a look based on their mothers, and then a look made entirely out of books. Really, this was a week where there was a bottom one. Derrick is told to drag up her makeup a bit, give them something different, and she's just not able to pull her looks together, especially the one that she made herself in time for this challenge. I think all of the other queens actually slayed this episode. Naomi and Chi-Chi's final looks are some of the best design challenge looks of all time. Kim's thematic storyline between all of her looks was beautiful, and Bob looked great in all of her looks as well. But someone has to send home Derrick, and Bob makes total sense to do it since their storylines were intertwined the entirety of the season. I also think it just makes sense here for Bob to be in the bottom. Despite doing well, I think the other 3 just did better than her overall. And her book look doesn't really look like it was made from books, like all the other looks did. It's also just good to have a queen who's been on top all season long have a fall from grace, where we get to see them kind of fight for their spot in the competition. It's very boring when queens just make it to the end without having to face any adversity, and we get to see Bob absolutely demolish this lip sync to You Make Me Feel Mighty Real by Sylvester. So I truly think that this lip sync is what sealed the win for Bob. Derrick goes home. We move on to the music video challenge, where the top 4 have to perform to The Realness, and only 3 get to move on to the finale. Now, these episodes are weird because they never have to do with what actually happens in the challenge. The queen cut is always just the one with the worst track record, and in this case, it's Chi DeVayne. But I remember being literally shocked that Chi Chi was cut because she was so integral to the season. And at the time, I still barely knew who Naomi was with her like very minimal edit. But looking at it now, Chi Chi did struggle through the competition while Naomi was in the top for the last 3 challenges and had another top placement before that. So Naomi was just more consistent, but Chi Chi was more dynamic, and in the end, they went with who did better in the competition. If this episode was based off of the challenge, Kim is for sure getting cut, but like that never happens, so Chi Chi is out. But it still stings whenever I remember that Chi Chi is no longer with us. She just had so much charisma and personality on the season and added so much to the overall story of the season. She was an immediate fan favorite, and I'm so happy that she got the call to All Stars right away. She was such a superstar, and I'm so sad that I never got to see her perform in person, since she will forever be known as one of the best performers to ever grace the main stage of Drag Race. But now we are at our top 3 finale. This is the season right before they introduced the lip sync for the crown, so they each have to do a performance number, and that's it. we have a reunion during the finale, and I mean, it's just wild to think about how much different this show was just like 1 season later. Just quickly talking about the performances, Kim does Fat Femmin' Asian, and it's a super funny song, but I mean, Kim's performance skills, they just weren't there yet. Still, she does fine, but the whole number is basically choreographed around her not being able to dance, so I think it grows a bit boring pretty quickly. Naomi does a great job to her song, Legs. It's a really catchy song, probably my favorite of the 3, and she has a lot of stage presence. But Bob demolishes from literally the first second her song starts. Her song is I Don't Like to Show Off, which is in reference to Michelle accusing her of showboating on the season. And Bob is just like dripping in charisma throughout the entire number. There's a rap first, there's this long note at the end that she's able to camp up. Even Mrs. Kasha Davis and Trinity K. Bonet step in to help her with the performance. It's by far the best number of the night, and when Bob wins the season, it's not surprising. Bob was only in the top the weeks that she won a challenge, but it felt like she demolished the entire season because even in the challenges where she was safe or even in the bottom, she just exudes so much power in the confessionals, in the workroom. It felt like she was owning the competition every single week. To this day, she's one of the most iconic winners of the entire franchise, and her being able to tour with fucking Madonna proves that. The full circle thing of like her doing the Madonna runway and then performing a worldwide tour with Madonna is just like, it's chef's kiss. This season truly is, though, I think, one of the fairest of the entire franchise. There's only a few placements that I think are a little bit sus. And so instead of doing a whole video about like how the season should have went, we can just talk about that right here, right now. We're going to start at the top 6 because like I know that I changed a couple little things, but like it was nothing major. Even the Cynthia Lee Fontaine versus Naysha Lopez lip sync in the premiere, Cynthia would win and that would change nothing. But what would happen if in the Shady Politics challenge, Chi Chi was low and Kim Chi was in the bottom with Thorgy Thor lip syncing to, and I'm telling you, this lip sync would be something. It would be something. I had an idea of what I thought might happen, but as a major Thorgy Thor stan, I didn't want my bias to get in the way. So I asked a couple of my friends who are drag artists. I asked Black Boy, and they all felt like Thorgy would probably win this. I think she probably wouldn't get as like, I don't know if desperate is the right word, but like when she does the cartwheel and stuff at the end, like I don't think that she would have to do any of that because she's not getting like fucking trampled by Chi DeVayne. I feel like she could have kept it just a little bit more of that like chill vibe. But could it have been a double elimination again for this? Probably. But let's say Thorgy Thor does beat Kim Chi, and Kim Chi goes home in 6th place. That takes us to the next episode, which is the book ball. And this is difficult because we don't know anything that Thorgy would wear. It's not like modern seasons where we can just look at like their Instagrams and see, oh, here's exactly what, they would have worn for this. We have no clue what Thorgy would have worn. So it's really a question of, is Thorgy going to do better than Bob in this challenge? And I feel like she probably would. I think that all she really needs to do is use paper. You know what I mean? Like the first two categories, the like dress like a baby and like dress like your mom, she probably would have had a nice moment, to talk more about her mom. She talked a little bit about her death earlier in the season. So that would have been a nice moment to see her like pay homage to her mother. I think she could have done something really silly and campy for like the baby drag queen look. And then I think as long as she, uses paper, we know that she can make a garment. We know that she can sew. We know that she's like crafty. And I think this is actually even better for her than when she got fabric for the cake ball in the premiere. I think that she's very crafty. And I think that with this type of challenge, she could pull out something really fun. So let's say that Thorgy would be high here and Bob would still be sending Derrick home. But then for the top four, I think Thorgy would get cut here because she's the only one without a challenge win. She did have a lot of high placements, so I think that it would probably be like lights out for Thorgy. And I don't know if she would be able to like do the realness the way that it might be like wanted to be done. Like I think she might be trying to be like too like woo, and she needs to be giving like kind of like cunty for the realness. Whereas I think Naomi slayed. I think Naomi ate this last challenge, and Chi also did great in this. So I think that Thorgy would probably do the worst of the four in the music video and had the worst track record. 0 wins, just a bunch of high placements and 1 bottom. So I think Thorgy would get cut, and we end up with a top 3 of Bob, Chi, and Naomi, which is iconic. And I don't think anything changes. I still think Bob wins the season. So besides Thorgy maybe possibly making it a little bit further and Kim getting cut earlier, I don't think much changes on this season if it's unrigged. So let me know what you think. A lot of people thought this was one of the most fair seasons when I was talking about doing this video and when I did a little poll on the YouTube community page. And I have to agree, it's very, very fair for the most part. But this was my first season I ever watched. I love this season. And now we have done Riggory videos for all of the All-Star seasons and every main season up until season 7. So the next Riggory video will be season 6, but don't expect that for a little bit because we're going to be doing All-Stars 9 Riggory, and then Canada versus the World Riggory will be coming. I think that's going to be a pretty short season, so expect season 6 Riggory this year for sure, but probably not anytime soon. All-Stars 9, I have so many thoughts on. If you've been following us on the pod talking about it, I really like this season. Kayla despises this season, so that makes for a very interesting podcasting experience. But I have a lot of thoughts on the season, so I'm excited to get started on the Riggory of All-Stars 9 video. That will be out the Tuesday after the season finishes, so like 2-ish weeks from now. Also, I am working on a collaboration with, I'm just going to announce it because I've been teasing it for a while and it's happening, Runner Eye. So we're going to be doing something kind of chaotic and fun coming up soon as well. Thank you all so much for watching, and all of my social medias are in the description below. So I will catch you all in the next one.